Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Space Age. In the last video I talked about how I've gone out to Aquilo and started setting up science production over there, and that made it to the last of the planets, well apart from the shattered one, which I don't know enough about to really comment on yet. However, in my rush to get out to all of these new planets and see all the new content in the game, I'd been neglecting going back and using the technologies that I'd been unlocking to make things better on Norvis and elsewhere. So I decided after I got things up and working basically on Aquilo, it was time to go around, sweep around and do some upgrades on all the planets and bring things up to sort of a more modern version of everything. So the first thing I did was I came back to Norvis and decided it was time to start using the Foundry methods of metal production instead of just feeding ore straight into smelteries. So previously I had these smelting systems over here where there's a mine over here that is still actually running technically and it's producing very small amounts of iron ore that are being fed through here and being made into steel. This was the original system I set up way back when I was on the planet. Because I initially started on my beginner patches down here. I had a little smelting array that would produce the iron and the steel, feed it down the bus, fine. Then I moved it off the bus to up here and brought the steel and iron and so on in by train, and then fed them along the bus. And so that kind of works. And then eventually I decided it was time to do it a bit more efficiently. So I moved off over to here, where I'm bringing in iron ore and also calcite, and that calcite is coming in from space. So we're dropping that in down here. I've got a space station called the which one is it? The space platform, Space Face, which up here is producing in theory is producing calcite, but there's not very much of the oxide asteroid chunks drifting around in space here. So we're kind of struggling. But in theory, this will capture all these little chunks of oxide ore that drift past and turn them into ice and calcite. And then the ice will be used for making the white science. The calcite will be dropped down to Norvis, where it can then be put into a train and taken up to the processing areas over here. And so this is taking, yes, as I say, bringing in the iron ore and the calcite. That's then being melted down into molten iron, which we're putting into these pipes, passing down to these additional foundries down here, where it's being turned into plates. And the main reason for doing this is because you can be much, much more efficient. So with the old system, you're bringing in, making steel, for example. You bring in the ore, it gets put into a smelter, it turns into iron plates here, and then turned into steel plates here. And there's 2 slots in each of these, so I could potentially put in 2 productivity modules. And since I'm playing with productivity 2s at the moment, that's these ones, because I haven't wanted to deal with the biter egg hassle yet. Probably will at some point, but not yet. I've been using tier 2 productivity modules basically everywhere, and that gives me a productivity buff of 6% per module, or 12% buff squared, which I'm going to put the number on screen because I don't really want to think about it off the top of my head, but that's going to give me an extra sort of roughly 25%, maybe a little bit, maybe 30%, something like that. And that's okay, but it's better than nothing, but it's not amazing. Alternatively, with this recipe, we bring in the iron ore here, pass it into the machines over here, and this takes in 50 iron ore and 1 calcite as well, and that makes 500 molten iron. Great. And then down here we take in 20 molten iron, it turns into 2 iron plates. So that is actually, on the face of it, that is exactly the same recipe. You're taking in, for each one piece of iron ore that you bring in, you produce 1 iron plate. However, that doesn't take into account the productivity boosts you get from using foundries. So each foundry on its own has, just a straight up foundry, will have a built-in productivity boost of 50%. You can see down there near the bottom, the base productivity is a 50% boost. It then also has room for 4 module slots in it. So at that point, you can then get a plus 24% boost. So that's a 74% buff coming from here. And all you need in order to use that is to bring in calcite as well. So we're getting a 74% increase here, and then feeding it into machines down here, which is another 74%, which means I'm slightly more than tripling the amount of iron that comes out compared to using the basic recipe where we just cook this stuff down. So given that the other one was maybe a 25% increase, to triple it is immense. That's going to mean we're going to get through enormously less iron, and that means iron ore rather, and that means all my mines are going to last a lot longer. And yes, I have had to go out and build another one up here because the ones down in the main part of the factory were running out. But that means those are going to last a very, very long time now. I've also done the same thing with steel, where again the recipe is basically the same, except we use 30 molten iron to make 1 steel. I think that's actually slightly cheaper because that's only equivalent of 3 iron plates per steel, and so we're getting even more steel out than we would otherwise. And of course I've done exactly the same with copper over here, so it's the same system. It's bringing in copper ore and calcite, melting the molten copper, and then producing copper plates. And well, there's some machines here that's trying to produce steel, but they aren't. That's because I just did a copy paste of the iron production area and haven't repurposed them for anything else yet. But you know, I can if I want to. The other part of this, though, that's even more significant, is that we can then take the metals away in molten form in a train. Now, we're not going to think too much about the physics of putting molten iron or molten copper into a train and driving it around with sort of tanks of metal tanks on the back and thinking about it maybe cooling and stuff like that. But with that, I was then able to produce this system over here for producing my green and red circuits. And so that's bringing in the molten copper and the molten iron, as you can see here. They're being piped up along here. And then I did the maths for it, and I worked out that we're better off making copper plates and then turning those into copper cables in the EM plant than I would be if I used the recipe for casting copper directly into copper cables. It's slightly more efficient that way. I get slightly more output for the amount of input I put in. So we do with the number of modules I'm using. So we're doing that because then you get another 50% buff for free from the EM plants, and then they take 5 modules, so that's another 30% on top of that. So we're getting a plus 80% productivity boost from those. So they fill up. The productivity bars fill up really, really quickly there. Then over here I'm producing the iron plates the traditional way, and then producing massive quantities of green circuits here that are being passed out to a train and taken away as and when they're required. Then I've got another copy of that exact same copper green circuit production facility here that is again making massive quantities of green circuits that are poured over here to go into the red circuit production, and we're bringing the plastic for those in by train. And then I've got a load of machines up here. Again, we're using the EM plants to make massive quantities of red circuits. I've also put in a little bypass here so that if we've got plenty of red circuits but we're a bit short of green circuits, we can pass those down this way as an afterthought and say, yes, okay, we'll use the ones that would be made into red circuits for supplying the green circuit systems if we want to. Just because they were there, they were available, I thought I might as well. That's allowing me to make the green and the red circuits in massive quantities much more efficiently. I've been able to, as usual, I've been able to move them off the bus, but not only have I moved them off the bus to a sub-factory that's making them en masse, it's making them en masse with a much more efficient recipe, much more efficient machines to do so, allowing me to have much higher productivity coming out there. I've even put some beacons in along here. I'm not very good at remembering to actually put beacons into my designs, but I am using them a little bit along here because when you put this many productivity modules into a machine, well, you can see here I'm running at a crafting speed of minus 50% on this one that isn't beaconed, whereas this one that is back up at 40%. That does mean we're using a lot of electricity, but we have a lot of headroom at the moment. If we look back over the last 50 hours or so, we can see it's spiked up occasionally to about 1.1 gigawatts. I've got 2.3 gigawatts of power production available because I've got a massive nuclear plant down here, which has been, well, I initially had just one setup system here, and I then found I didn't have enough power, so I quadrupled it just because I didn't want to mess around. I just wanted to make sure I always had enough electricity, and that's, in my opinion, that's the way to do it. It's best to go a bit overkill and not risk running out, rather than have to come back every couple of hours and go, oh wait, I need a bit more power, oh wait, I need even more power, and so on and so on. Yeah. And with the new pump and fluid systems, you only actually now need one pump for an entire quad reactor nuclear power plant, which is rather nice. So that's made the all of this a lot simpler to plumb together as well, which I appreciate. I've also got my refueling stations over here that keep jamming up and breaking because the trains will go into them and then stop. I'm not quite sure why that's happening. It's something to do with the interrupts, and it is breaking everything, but I'm not quite sure why. I don't know why they go in. Oh, well, I know why they go in because the interrupt triggers them to go in and refuel, which is the point of it. But then for some reason they just sit there. They don't carry on with whatever order they were doing before, and maybe it's because another train has gone off and done the task they were trying to do. So I need to find them. I need to give them somewhere to go and sit, or yeah, I don't know. But it's causing problems anyway, and that's a bit annoying, and I should probably look into it at some point. So those were the big improvements on Norvis itself. I've expanded my territory out a little bit and got a few more mines up here. I was running short of stone, so there's a stone mine up here. I'm going to need another uranium mine at some point because this one is down to 42,000. There is a patch there. That's in an area that's, well, I haven't claimed it yet, but all the biters have been cleared out because my artillery train goes out and shells everything whenever it goes to refill my outposts with ammunition. So that's working quite nicely. But at some point, yeah, maybe I'll come out. The easy way perhaps would be to put a wall across here, but that's quite a long wall. It might be more fun to come out and have a look and see where the next set of bottlenecks are, because or choke points are rather, because it looks like there should be a fairly narrow choke point about here, and then maybe there'll be something over here I can use and claim this whole area and quite a bit more in one fairly easy swoop. I don't know. We'll have to maybe trundle out there with a tank at some point, or maybe head back over there with my power armor and fly around having a look at things. Either way, it shouldn't be too difficult to sort that out. So this has been my normal practice with Factorio, where I start off with everything on the main bus, and then I move the mining off for the ores when the starter patches run out. Then I move the smelting off when the smelting can't keep up. Then I move the circuit production off when that can't keep up. And then the next thing I usually do is move the science production off. And I've kind of done that. So if we look over here at the landing pad, we can see that over here I've moved various science productions off planet. So okay, the white science obviously comes from off planet. The pink and orange and agricultural and cryo, they all have to come from off planet because that's where they're made. But also you'll notice here that I'm bringing in yellow science, which I seem to have run out of, which is a little bit unfortunate, and also red and green and blue and grey. And that's because all of those I decided would be much more efficiently produced on other planets, and so I've been doing a bit of messing around there. And Vulcanus was the obvious starting point, because Vulcanus has this lovely system where you can pull lava out of the lakes here, and then turn that into iron and molten copper. You have to add some calcite in, but it's basically it just works. Lava will turn into essentially unlimited free metals, and these patches never run out. It's like water on Norvis. So we can get loads and loads of that flowing through here. Then that can flow up the pipes, and because we've got unlimited free iron and copper, well, red science is just iron and copper, so why not make that here? Because we're never going to run out of the resources. All we need at this point then is to have rockets to take it away, and that's not too bad. Green science similarly is also iron and copper, because you need to make it into green circuits, but that is still just iron and copper, and then you need to make that into inserters and belts, but again, all just iron and copper. So yeah, let's make those here as well. Then I thought, what else have we got? What's the next science pack? Well, there's the military science, and that one's made largely from stone, and we've got crazy amounts of stone available on this planet. Not quite as much as I thought when I initially built it, or at least not all the time, because the stone comes from the lava processing down here. So we've got quite a lot of it coming through. It's not too bad, but well, it's not quite as unlimited as I was thinking, because if we're just making military science, we're not using enough iron and copper up for the ammunition and so on in order to keep the stone flowing in for the bricks, which is why I've got productivity modules in here. That said, when other things are running as well, then you have plenty of it available. And somebody pointed out to me, and I can't believe I didn't realise this, that there's no reason why I couldn't just have a machine somewhere building copper cables or iron plates or or belts or something, and just chucking them into the lava to destroy them, just to put more load on the iron and copper systems to make sure that we always had stone flowing through. Now, I haven't actually needed to do that yet. As you can see by this belt, we have a lot of military science available at the moment, but it's a thing I could fall back on if I absolutely have to. So yes, that's the walls, and the ammunition is just iron and copper and steel, which is basically iron. The outlier on this one was the grenades, because grenades, yes, okay, they take iron in, but they also take coal as well. And there isn't an infinite supply of coal on this planet. There's quite a lot. We've got a nice, well, there's 355,000 here, but I'm using the big drill, so actually it's effectively 700,000. But that has dropped off quite a lot. We've used up quite a bit of that. But there are a number of other big patches. There's a 13 million over here, which is only a short train ride away. I'm sure there's more patches around. There's another 5 million down here. There's 8.5 million there, and so on. So it's not going to be too difficult to find So it's not going to be too difficult to find more coal as and when I need it. And we don't get through military science that quickly, although at the moment I'm doing a railgun shooting speed. But in general, we don't get through it that quickly, so that's probably basically okay. Next up was the blue science, which I decided in a fit of sheer insanity would be fun to try and produce on Gleba. And this is sort of based on the resources required to make it. So I was looking at the science pack requirements, and you need sulfur, which doesn't really exist on Vulcanus. I mean, yes, technically, yes, you can break the coal down and use coal liquefaction to turn it into oil and then to petroleum gas and turn it into sulfur, but it's not very nice, and there's a limited supply of it over there. Similarly, red circuits require plastic, which again comes from oil, which means it has to come from coal, and again, not an enormous supply of that over there. Engine units are just iron and iron by the looks of it, and then advanced circuits of course have some iron and copper in there as well. But I had green and red circuits being produced on Gleba in some quantities, so I thought this isn't too bad. Why not just go with that? So I'm now producing blue science in suitably large quantities, suitably ridiculous quantities looking at this, and that's then piped off to a rocket silo over here, where it can then be shipped up to space and taken off over to Norvis to be then dropped down, and science things can be done with it there. And it goes on the same spaceship as the agricultural science packs do, because the ship's already rattling backwards and forwards, and this way it just means I tell it to leave Norvis whenever it runs out of either type of science pack. It can come over here, it can make sure it's got 2,000, 3,000, however many thousand of each of the science packs, fly back over to Norvis, then unload whatever it needs to. So if we look at take a look at this, but there's some blue science being dropped now, for example. There, it's got a load of blue science on it. It's got a little bit of the agricultural science. It can drop those down as they're needed, and send them over to be processed down there. The other big upgrade I did was on Fulgora, and this was for the yellow science, because I'd looked at the production of I'd looked at the things you require to make yellow science, and I'd gone, okay, it's processing units which are being produced in decent quantities on this planet. They come out of the scrap, and low density structures which are coming out of the scrap as well. So we've got loads of those, and flying robot frames which aren't too bad. I'm sure we can build them on site, and yes we can. We've got all the bits and pieces coming in here. We can recycle cogs down into iron to make the pipes here, and then the cogs and the pipes can go in here along with some steel. Also comes pouring out of the scrap to make the engine units, and then making lube is absolutely trivial, because we just pull some heavy oil out of the seas here, turn that into lube, and we can feed that into make the electric engines. So we've got loads of electric engines, easy. So that bit was fine. Then over here, yeah, we've got blue circuits coming in. Yes, there's a decent supply of those. Oh, we don't seem to have very many low density structures. So yes, making low density structures at a suitable rate is the challenge here. So if we look at the scrap recycling recipe, okay, we get 2%. We get 2 processing units out for every 100 scrap we process. We only get 1 low density structure out, and that's not really enough, because we need those low density structures and the blue circuits as well in order to make the rockets. As you can see here, we've actually run out completely of low density structures. The system is not actually capable of keeping up, which is rather unfortunate, because I spent quite a lot of time and effort building up this rather large area here to make yellow science and rockets at a decent rate, because my hope was that I'd be able to ship out massive quantities of blue circuits, massive quantities of rockets from here. But it's not going very well, because we're not producing enough low density structures from the scrap processing over here. Now, I've done various boosts to the scrap processing productivity down here, so you can see we're at plus 80% at the moment, but that doesn't actually increase the output of anything useful, because we've got essentially a full blue belt coming out over here with stuff on it. It just decreases the amount that comes in from the trains and from the drop-off patches. So it is kind of working out. I've got 2 blue belts worth of processed stuff coming out. It's still woefully inadequate. So I thought, okay, well, we've got all these things coming through here. We've got loads of steel. We can make plastic by recycling red circuits. We've got some plastic coming through here, and we've got a bit of copper coming out as well from any cables that get recycled. So let's feed all of them down in here and start making more low density structures on site. And you know, it kind of helps, but you can tell by the sheer number of productivity modules I've got in here just how much it's been helping, which is not enough. And so I thought, okay, well, let's start dropping copper ore down from space as well, because I've got various spaceships that sit up in orbit above here, and various platforms and things. Let's have them just drop down anything they're managing to gather in space, and again, that's helping a little bit, and we're getting out little trickles of copper like this. Now, I'm thinking, looking at this, I should come along with my productivity modules and just do this and make everything run a bit more productively. And then we've already got them in the low density structure production here. I should probably also then put them in all of these and have my we'll get more yellow science out than for the number of green circuits we're putting in. It then won't run quite as fast as I intended it to when I did the maths and put all of this together, but we'll get more yellow science coming out than we were before. I have already filled the rocket silos up with productivity modules, so we're using as little as possible of the input ingredients over here, and that is probably helping quite a lot. But I think this is going to make a big difference, and I think putting the productivity modules in over here is going to help a bit as well, so it's going to mean a bit more copper coming out. Yeah, so hopefully the bots have started filling up from the top down, which is nice. And so we'll get, we should get a little bit more a little more yellow science coming out now. And in fact, looking at this, the belt has now backed up all the way along. So that means, or has backed up all the way along to here. So that means we can now just fill the belt up down to all the way down to the bottom, and then we can fill the belt up here with the low density structures. And that will mean we'll then finally start allowing the low density structures to go past here, send them over to here where they can start being made into rockets, and that means we're going to be able to then launch a load of the yellow science, and then we're going to have to make a load more. And oh dear, it's just sort of it's an endless problem. But I am cautiously optimistic that bumping the productivity up by 24% here is going to help somewhat. We shall see whether it's enough, but hopefully that's going to be all right. I might come in and put in some beacons down here as well to speed these back up, because this has gone from a speed of 1.25 down to a speed of 0.75. So we've lost almost half the speed of these machines. That is the downside of productivity modules, of course, but the upside is the free stuff you get out of them. So I could make them run faster if I needed to, but we'll leave that to run for a little while first, and then decide how we feel about it a bit later. Heading back over to Gleba now for a little while. I have made some further improvements over here. So you probably don't remember, because I might not have zoomed out and showed you the sort of quite the sort of extreme view. But previously I had my Glebian factory on this island here. So we're producing all of the everything, all of the science, all of the metals, all the stuff running off the bus here, and it was a horrible, tangled, cramped bowl of spaghetti, and it was kind of awful. And to make it even worse, my plantations for it were here for the jelly nuts and up here for the Yamakos, and those are quite close to the base, especially as a lot of the attacks were coming from sort of this general area. And because you produce your pollution from the areas where your plantations are, where you do the fruit harvesting, that meant that I had a pollution cloud that was sort of basically centered on more or less on my factory. And so any attacks that came in from around this side had to tromp straight through the middle of the factory to get to the areas where they were interested in. And that was bad, because due to the sort of tangle and the difficulties of this area, I wasn't really defending it as well as I should have been, and so we got glebed a little bit. Things did not go brilliantly. So I decided it was time to move on to Gleba 4.0, redesign the thing entirely. And so the first thing I did was move the Yamako and jelly nut harvesting areas way up off to the north, or at least kept them away from the area that I was building my factory in. And I think this has made an enormous difference, because now if we look at the pollution cloud, you can see, yes, it is down to the factory, which is not ideal, and perhaps in hindsight I should have extended even further north and done it up here or something like that, and then I wouldn't even need a wall around my factory down here. But I think I'd feel safer having a wall around the factory anyway, so this is kind of okay. And the attacks, we've had a few attacks coming in round this way, but nothing has attacked anywhere near my factory. I think. Oh no, we had a little bit coming in about here. But mostly it's been pretty good. So we've moved them up here out of the way. I've also expanded quite a bit, so I've now got multiple agricultural towers. We've got loads of jelly nuts growing up here. We can harvest loads of them. As you can see, there's loads on the belt. They're all slowly going off. They do last quite a long time, so it's not too bad. And then down here I've got the same sort of thing with Yamako. I've got 4 of these, because we seem to get through Yamako faster than jelly nut for some reason. So yeah, we've got all of that being produced, and then it goes into trains, which will quickly, they'll fill up as much as they can in 30 seconds and then head off, because we want the fruit to be decently fresh. That gets dropped off down here, goes onto the belts, it's brought down here, and then this is essentially the same idea as the system I had running before, in that we pulp the fruit, and then we pass it through to, we make the bioflux and the nutrients from it pretty much as quickly as we possibly can, and then we pass it on to make the eggs and the science packs as quickly as we can. I want this to be a steady flow going past here all the time, and to just keep the system running, and so we've got the freshest of all of the ingredients coming in here, in the hope that we'll be making the science with as much life left on it as possible. And so you can see here we've got at the bottom end, it's still got half an hour left there. It's about half an hour, which isn't amazing, but is better than nothing. Oh, actually no, we've got a huge amount in this chest here. That's not good. That shouldn't be happening. We should only be filling up to about we should be turning these machines off when that chest has more than 1,000 in it, I reckon. So that needs some fixing, because the ship isn't flying back and forth often enough by the looks of it. Anyway, so yes, that's it's a bit dodge, but we do have, we've got some decently fresh science in here. You can see there's 51 minutes left on that, so that's not too bad. Then after that, there's other stuff we want to do with all the fruit jelly pulps, but they're not as time critical. So down here, for example, we're making what I've been referring to as dry ingredients out of them, by which I mean things that aren't going to decay, things that aren't going to go off and turn to spoilage. So for example, we've got rocket fuel here, which is being made for the rocket, which we can launch from here, and then being passed down partly for generating electricity, partly for the other rocket silos further down. Then we're making plastic and iron and copper and carbon and sulfur. These are all being made in here. We've got a decent supply of them all, I think. Yeah, these all seem to be doing pretty well. We've got plenty of everything. Then we're making a bit of lube as well as it's required. Lots of carbon fibre, because I reckon on this being a thing that we're going to need decent amounts of, because it's one of the things that Gleba can export. We seem to be sending in the Yamako mash here. There's a bit of a shortage of Yamako mash. This is what I mean about us seeming to get through a lot more Yamako than everything else. The mash is in very, very high demand. And it's on here just gradually going off and then being disposed of, which is a little bit silly, but meh. I sort of don't care too much. Then anyway, come further down here. Then we're turning the iron and copper ore that's made from the bacteria into the metals, and then loads of metal production down here. And we're making cogs and steel up here directly from the molten stuff, because that seemed like a good idea at the time. Then we can make coal we can make coal from carbon and sulfur in the sort of way that you often do in space, and that means I can make explosives, and that means I can make an enormous quantity of rockets, and the rockets are important for keeping this place safe, which I'll talk about in a moment. Low density structures, we've got loads of these. Maybe I should be shipping them from here over to Fulgora. That seems a little bit silly, but you know, it might actually not be that silly. It might be a sensible idea. Landfill, sure. Loads of belt production down here. Circuits. I've got a mini bus going a mini mall going along here, where I'm making all of the buildings that I require for whenever I build more stuff on Gleba, working quite nicely. Artillery shells, because this is a hostile planet, and then we're into that blue science I talked about before. And I've got just your standard main bus running down here. Lots of bits run in funny directions though. So here, for example, we've got the artillery shells and the low density structures running upwards. We've got most things running downwards. And then over here, we've got all the fruity gunge coming back up over here to then be sort of dealt with over here. So we're putting some bioflux into a rocket for when we need that over on Norvis. We're then spoiling the any remaining bioflux down to... actually, no, we're not. We're passing the bioflux back round because it might as well just be recirculated, because there's so many machines that use it. And then anything left over then just gets chucked into the burner towers over here to be turned into electricity. Unfortunately, there's not enough random fruit gunge coming through in order to keep the base fully powered. So occasionally we need to turn on these heating towers over here, and we'll chuck a load of rocket fuel in that's being made on planet as well. So it's all still self-sufficient, but sometimes we use the rocket fuel to bump the temperature up a little bit. You can see this is only at 555 degrees. So these will run whenever there's a shortage of steam. At the moment we've got plenty of steam, so actually perhaps the factory isn't trying all that hard at the moment, because we're not using a lot of the sciences. I don't know, but it's not trying too hard. So the factory, the fruit coming through seems to be enough for it to keep up. But we may need to upgrade that. We may need to use some rocket fuel at some point to keep everything running. So in order to keep the pentas at bay, I've stuck these artillery wagons on the back of both of my fruit trains. And that means we've then got the crazy artillery range. No, I meant to click on that one. And as you can see, with the number of artillery range researches I've done, the range basically encompasses the entire pollution cloud. So I could probably do with doing at least one more, because I think that might have expanded a little bit. But we are essentially defending the pollution cloud, and that's the best way to do things, because it means we can keep the whole area safe. Maybe I should have another artillery train that will park over here and then over here, just to spread it out a little bit more. But to be honest, it's working pretty well. It's keeping us safe. I think this is okay, and I have a solid wall of rocket turrets going all the way around the outside of the base that will keep the area defended. There are a few areas where we tend to get more attacks. You can see all of these dead pentapod stomper shells all the way around the outside here. That's why there's additional rocket turrets here. But the rocket turrets are all backed up with Tesla turrets that will deal with any of the small guys, the little scrambly critters, and then there's some more laser turrets that will also lend a little bit of assistance as and where required. I've only really put the laser turrets in areas that get particularly excitable, so most of the walls I haven't bothered, because to be honest, the rocket turrets and the Tesla turrets are more than capable of keeping those areas safe. And this has meant that it has now been quite a long time since we last got glebbed, and so I'm quite happy with that. We lose the occasional rocket turret when we've expanded the artillery range, blown up a load of new egg rafts, and a couple of stompers come over to say, "Excuse me, do you mind?" But the rocket turrets, are essentially capable of dealing with anything that Gleba seems to be able to throw at me at the moment, with only acceptable losses. And acceptable means maybe 1 or 2 rocket turrets, which the bots will then immediately fly out and replace. So this is working very nicely. I'm very happy with the way the defences are working, and yeah, Gleba seems to be... I don't want to say Gleba seems to be tamed, but for now, things seem to be mostly okay. Finally, I think I should touch briefly once more on Vulcanus. You might have noticed that I've expanded my territory quite a lot. There's a lot more space available that isn't covered in these red hatchings, and that's because I built a railgun over on Aquilo, and it turns out a railgun is ludicrously effective against the demolishers. You can certainly single shot even the medium ones because the railgun rounds penetrate. So if you shoot them from dead head on, it will go through the first segment, then the second segment, then the third segment, and so on, and it will do several thousand damage to every single segment. And even a medium demolisher can't stand against that, as you can see here. So if we look at the railgun ammo, we can see that it does currently 26,000 damage. If we look at a medium demolisher, we can see that it has health of 100,000. So as long as you manage to hit 4 of its segments with one shot, which is absolutely trivial to do, you can one-shot those things, and they pop like balloons. It's amazing. The big ones have a base health of 300,000, so I guess that means you'd need to hit about 12, 13 segments in order to kill one with a single shot. I don't know if that's going to be viable. It also regains 2,400 health per second, but I think that's going to be okay. The railgun fires about once a second, so that's not too bad. It's maybe slightly more than a second. So it will have regained about a railgun, one railgun hit's worth of damage in that time, or health in that time. So as long as you can hit more than one demolisher segment per shot, I think I'm probably going to be okay. So I'll probably be able to two-shot one of those at the moment. And we're also improving the shooting speed at the moment with that research. It's going to get even better. Right, so that's covered all of the improvements I've made across the factory when it comes to sort of building things a bit more efficiently anyway. I've been going in and using the more efficient buildings, moving things off to more efficient planets, stuff like that. There's still work to be done. As you've seen, the yellow science was not keeping up on Fulgora, but progress has certainly been made, and things are working better than they did before. If we look over on Norvis, we can see that we have reasonable amounts of most of the science packs, and I've got an alert set up over here to monitor what we're short of. The white science is still the problem science, and that's the one that's being made on this space platform here, and we're just not getting in enough of the icy asteroids. So it's probably about time I started processing in other ways and started using the asteroid reprocessing recipes to try and make more oxide asteroids out of the other asteroids chunks we can capture. Also, if I put in that inserter there, that would help quite a bit as well, and we'll get a little bit of ice out of that, and that'll give me a little flurry of white science being made. But yeah, I think it's a little bit limited at the moment. We're not making as much as I would like us to be, but I don't know what to do. I can extend this further to then gather from a wider area or a taller area. I don't know. There just isn't that much ice in Norbit. The other possibility would be to ship ice up here and have ships that go out to places like Aquilo. So on the flight out to Aquilo, there's huge amounts of the oxide asteroids. So a ship going out there could come back with an enormous quantity of ice. But there's no way to easily pass stuff from one space platform to another. You have to drop it down to the ground. So that would be dropping it down onto Norvis here, and then putting it into a rocket to take it back up again. And that feels kind of wasteful. I don't really want to do that. The other possibility is to have a spaceship that drifts around the solar system producing white science, and then comes back and drops a couple of thousand of it onto this planet, and then goes off and makes more just from flying around in circles. That's certainly a possibility. Maybe that would be better. I don't know. Well, it's something I'm going to need to have a bit of a think about, though, because at the moment, this system isn't really working. Having white science being the one that I'm short of seems absolutely ridiculous, so I think some work is going to need to be done there as well. But that's going to come up in the next stream, so make sure you come back on Mondays and Wednesdays every week to watch me getting on with this and fiddling with more things in the whole Factorio world and seeing how things go. The videos will be coming out every Friday as well, talking about Factorio or woodworking, or maybe Factorio tutorials, or maybe cars. Who knows? There's going to be loads of videos coming out though, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time. Bye bye.